Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Open Wheel FM podcast. My name is Nicholas Clay, and on today's episode, we are going to be covering all of the action that happened at the Monaco Grand Prix this past weekend, as well as all of the action on track at IndyCar in St. Louis as well. Before we start the episode, if you are liking what you hear or you find anything interesting within this week's episode, make sure to give this episode a like as well as a follow on your audio listening platform of choice. I am on Spotify, Apple Podcast, as well as YouTube, and you can find clips from the show of the most important moments within each week's episode on my Instagram and TikTok as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can follow along on the Open Wheel FM podcast. But I appreciate you being here on the journey. And again, if you like what you hear, give this episode a thumbs up. And also comment down below if there's anything that I missed in this week's episode, something that interests you, or maybe something that maybe I can talk about next week's episode. So without further ado, I wanted to jump in and talk about what transpired in Monaco, it's Monaco, right? So typically for those that are maybe new to the motorsport scene or Formula One in general, Monaco typically does not deliver the best on-track racing action on Sunday. But typically, though, Saturdays, during qualifying is usually a little bit better, and there's a lot more at stake, especially, going around Monte Carlo. There is, you're on the limit. Typically, when you're in qualifying, you're pushing the car to the limit, and it's really cool to watch the actual qualifying happen. I mean, it's a high stake. It's probably the highest staked qualifying session of the entire year because, well, there's not really much that you can do during the race in terms of passing other drivers. So qualifying is so significant. But regardless, though, it provides us a lot of memories, at least in terms of the Formula One history books. And we actually have a driver on the grid that is from Monaco, which is kind of crazy because it's such a small country, or I guess a principality, that to have a driver on the Formula One grid is pretty crazy. So it's a home race for him. But speaking of Charles Leclerc, it was discussed and talked about, and it came out from Ferrari earlier on before the race weekend that they had met and there was a mutual agreement for a extension of the contract that Leclerc had going into this season and for years to come. It was basically a multi-year contract, and I guess if you've been following the contracts within Formula One, it's kind of a thing now where for some drivers, they don't really disclose how long their contracts are, as opposed to in a lot of other sports, it's kind of known how many years on a contract somebody has. There's this loaded definition and terminology within the paddock of multi-year contracts. So there's not really a definitive, what extension or for how long Leclerc had signed for. I know that there was some rumors that it might have been past 2030, but regardless, though, we know that he was coming off of a pretty brutal Canadian Grand Prix where he said that it was probably one of the worst weekends in his Formula One career. He's been struggling a lot with his brakes, and that I guess that kind of ended up affecting him in the race at Monaco as well this weekend. So for him to basically sign this deal, to me, there's not really very many places on the grid for him to go at the moment. So him kind of getting locked down with Ferrari kind of seems like he wants to be on a team that can win him a championship, and Ferrari if it's not Mercedes or Red Bull or McLaren, Ferrari is definitely one of the best bets that you can have in terms of having a push for a championship at the moment. So it also says he has a lot of faith in the team, and there was a lot of faith in Ferrari this weekend in Monaco on how they would perform. This track specifically suits the Ferrari car really, really well. And there was, I would say, considerable hype from a lot of pundits and people up and down the grid, especially with, how the Ferrari car, which, has a smaller turbo, it doesn't really perform super well in the straights, but thankfully this is not a track that is highly reliant on the power and more so reliant on the actual downforce levels, as well as curbing, as well as a lot of other things. And Ferrari has kind of exhibited those traits as being the most complete chassis on the grid. Aerodynamically, it's also probably the best car on the grid as well, and it's probably not even really that close. The real issue with Ferrari is their power, and I think it's that power unit, and specifically their decision to go with that smaller turbo hasn't really worked out too well for them. Thankfully, though, there was, let's just say, some information out there that we got some further confirmation regarding the ADUO information as well, which is pretty significant. But yeah, so this is kind of the big thing for the episode before we even talk about Monaco. Was this ADUO that was being talked about in the paddock. And I briefly mentioned about it in my previous episodes, that the additional development upgrade opportunity, or ADUO, is quite significant for these regulations, and specifically for a team like Ferrari, who has been battling this power unit deficit, let's just say, comparatively to someone like Mercedes or even Red Bull on a lot of circuits, right? They may start off well, but to continue it, especially in tracks that have long straights, they just can't keep up. But it was announced that they basically found the benchmark, and this is where it gets a little controversial. Obviously, this is significant. It's not set in stone exact, but the FIA deemed that Red Bull powertrains was actually the best of the field as the benchmark in terms of the internal combustion engine. And as a result of that, them being set as the benchmark there, the teams down the grid, including Mercedes, so Mercedes, Audi, Ferrari, and Honda, will all be getting ADUO access. Yes, I said that right. Mercedes is getting additional opportunities to enhance their current iteration of the power unit, which has kind of caused a little bit of a ruckus, let's just say, on social media and up and down the paddock specifically. The 2% deficit that they've deemed that Mercedes has comparatively to Red Bull means that they will be getting $3 million to be able to better their car, which is crazy. And they'll be getting 70 additional hours of testing for their power unit. And for a car that, again, if the race results show within the last 6 races, that Mercedes being able to have additional time to make their powertrains even better is a pretty scary thought to think about. Now, there's been some issues with how ADUO is deemed and determined. The first one is specifically the fact that it addresses exclusively the internal combustion engine and nothing else, which is kind of it just doesn't make much sense. I mean, we're in a 50-50 split regulation, and clearly the electrical side is the more important and the most differentiated part between each of the manufacturers in terms of the performance, right? The reason that Mercedes is having this performance may not necessarily be because they have the best internal combustion engine, but they clearly understand the electrical side and the hybrid of that better than any other team on the grid, and it's not even close, right? Now the issue is that they get additional time to address their power unit, which is only going to make them potentially even scarier because they're given not only just, an additional upgrade this year, but they also get one for 2027 as well. On the flip side of that, Red Bull is kind of is in a situation where, yes, they came in, this is their first year as Ford, Red Bull powertrains, and the fact that, they've been able to make the best internal combustion engine is definitely a pat on the back for the team. The caveat is that now their hands are tied behind their back and they can't develop further, as their competition is going to be able to have access to that this year and next year as a catch-up mechanism. Now, again, none of this is for certain. There will definitely be a lot of deliberation going on in Barcelona this upcoming weekend. So we still have a lot to, I guess, unpack and digest about that, and we'll be getting more clarity as the season rolls on, because I know that there will definitely be some teams out there that will be having some questions about this, specifically, Mercedes having further resources to better what is arguably the most front-running car of the entire year, and it's not even really close right now at this point. So for those that don't know, the ADUO, you have a 2% and a 4%, and then there's this kind of created 10% for the Aston Martin team, which has shown a lot of work needing to be done. So the 2% being down is about 11 horsepower, which is what they're typically contributing to on the internal combustion side. 11 horsepower is not really a whole lot, in terms of the grand picture of things, which is why I think that the overall, it can be significant, in straights, but 2%, 4%, maybe a little bit more to that, yes, especially every single straight, which is kind of where Ferrari has kind of had issues, which again is very surprising that it's up to Red Bull being the benchmark team here, which again, every team also, this is important. So as much as we want to get mad at Mercedes here, that's not necessarily the right person that we should be pointing fingers at, because all the teams signed this agreement before 2026 to say that they are going to be focusing just on the internal combustion engine as a metric for the allocation, I guess, of any additional upgrade opportunities that the teams that are behind the benchmark team will get. So they all signed this, and because of that, they're trying to figure out, and the question also is because we don't know anything about how the FIA measures or deems or decides to do any of this, in terms of how they've been able to, measure each of them, because I guess they said for IP purposes, that we don't really know. So again, the paddock is a pretty closed paddock. There's a lot of whisper, a lot of talk, and there definitely will be a lot of conversations having at the upcoming race this next weekend in Barcelona. Now, the actual race itself, we my prediction is that Ferrari was going to claim pole. They were going to get their first victory here. And it looked to be that case going into the first two practices, with both of the Ferrari pairs being able to come out on top in the practice sessions. The car just looked very balanced. It looked a lot stronger than the rest of the field in terms of what it was able to do over a single lap. And we know that lap time is significant, especially when you're trying to prep for a qualifying, which is so significant in Monaco already. It was in practice 3, though, that we did see a little bit of the Kimi Antonelli effect. And I didn't really think that he would come out on top and put a pole position in Monaco, in just his second season. I know that he's riding a high right now. I know that he's been able to do some really incredible things this year. To me, I thought it would have been one of the Ferraris, and maybe he would be kind of like a close 4th or 5th potentially. But he was able to shock everybody in practice 3 and in qualifying. There was a very interesting thing that he was doing at the Nouvelle chicane, where he was braking the latest out of any single driver on the grid, and he was picking up over 0.2 of a second over the competition, which is pretty significant around that corner. I know that Mercedes had brought a specific package for Monaco. There was pictures and images, and you can go look them up as well, of their downforce rear wing that Kimi was able to use brilliantly, as the car was able to be tuned in on Saturday to exhibit and allow him to be able to get that pole position for that. In qualifying, it was Max Verstappen who also had the second set of surprises for that Red Bull team, as information came out that they have the best internal combustion engine on the grid. Max able to do what he's done before. He's a race winner around Monte Carlo, and he was able to put it in P2, narrowly missing out on that, which honestly makes Kimi's pole position even more impressive. The fact that he was able to not only beat both of the Ferraris, but also able to come out on top over Max Verstappen. He was just lights out. That car underneath him was just so good on Saturday, and he even showed it in the actual race itself. The race on Sunday was pretty interesting. It was a pretty clean race for the most part. There wasn't really a whole lot going on. In fact, we had we didn't actually get any safety car intervention until late in the race. I think it was like after lap 60 is when we actually had any kind of intervention. So most of the race was simply drivers driving around. There wasn't really a whole lot of places being made on the start, which is really kind of the only place that you could actually make anything off of. Pierre Gasly was someone who successfully was able to get by Lando Norris on the race start. That was kind of something that I remembered on the top of my head. But the overall race was pretty much net and key. There was a very interesting, at least for those 60 laps, there was a lot of drivers being dinged for pit lane speeding. Now, they had moved the sensor because of Cadillac's garage. They had moved the sensor slightly, I guess was the rumor about it. But there was some drivers that were it was 1 kilometer an hour over the acceptable metric, and they were getting dinged for this. Pierre Gasly was kind of the worst. He got the worst brunt of it, unfortunately for him, where he missed out on a podium position for that. But it was just very interesting overall how that was getting all drivers up and down the grid. We saw Lewis get pinged for it. We saw Pierre Gasly. We saw George Russell, Oscar Piastri. We saw a bunch of different drivers that kind of got caught up in that as well. In terms of the outcome of where the driver started on the grid, it was Max Verstappen who didn't even get to start the race. And I'm surprised I even glossed over it, to be honest with you. But Max Verstappen on the start, his car went into an anti-stall, and he ultimately just they parked the car after the first lap. Really unfortunate for him, especially the fact that he, qualified P2 in the race. It was kind of difficult, to kind of just like have that all set up, to be able to go into the first corner, potentially to challenge Kimi, and Kimi kind of just, he didn't really have to get challenged that much because Max ultimately wasn't able to race because of that. The other, I guess, person that kind of fell out of the race due to technical issues with the car was Lando Norris, which is really heartbreaking, honestly. I mean, he's been plagued this entire season with reliability issues, and the reliability issues still continue for what it seems like to be every single Mercedes car, with the exception of Kimi Antonelli, who's had, incredible reliability through all of it. It's very interesting. We praise, or at least I was praising, the Mercedes power unit for having such a strong battery, but it also seems like that hybrid battery system is catching a lot of the drivers that use that power unit and is causing potential reliability issues in the race as a whole. But McLaren has kind of had a very off season for the most part, especially with these reliability issues. We know that they had to retire both drivers in China. Lando has had back-to-back DNFs as well. So it's been pretty rough for Papaya this season. I hope that they're able to figure out what's going on. And honestly, this race didn't really look that great for them either. They were lacking on power overall. They weren't able to really be competitive with the front runners, and that kind of stayed true throughout all of practice, qualifying, and the race as well. Oscar Piastri was mentioning that as well, that they just don't have the pace, and maybe that's specific to this track that they just weren't able to execute upon. So someone I did want to praise was, of course, Kimi Antonelli, who was able to convert that pole position into his 5th consecutive race win. Very impressive, the fact that his first 5 wins have all come consecutively, and all of them coming through after pole positions. It's been pretty good, I would say. Like, the fact that he's been able to convert on 4 pole positions and has been able to win 5 races even after some of the starts that he's had, it's been the Kimi show, and he looks so confident. The fact that he's braking as late as he is, he's very aggressive, and he's willing to, he has the poise and the maturity, and he's only getting better. And with Mercedes, potentially with this ADUO, I mean, it's going to be pretty scary to see where he goes from here, not even just this season, but consecutive seasons during this regulation cycle that we're in at the moment. As I mentioned, he was using some pretty good, he had a pretty good running out of the Nouvelle Chicane, which kind of allowed him to secure that pole position for himself. And then Pirelli released their information, and he was the fastest on all 3 compounds throughout the entire week. So he was just lights out. I mean, there's nothing more to say about that. It's going to be interesting to see if George is going to be able to take the fight to him in Barcelona, which is crazy to say, but I mean, coming off of 5 consecutive wins, my money is definitely on him to continue the form moving forward, because there's no stop to him at the moment. Another person that I wanted to praise was Lewis Hamilton, who got his 2nd consecutive 2nd place finish. after the previous weekend in Canada, where he was able to do so. After a very strong race in Montreal, he was able to replicate that in Monaco this past weekend. I mean, Lewis has looked very confident this season, way more so than he did previously. He now is second in the Drivers' Championship, ahead of George Russell, with his recent form to thank. I mean, the guy is bubbly in and out of the paddock. He is just exuberating this kind of energy that says, like, I'm actually glad to be here and I'm ready to race and prove myself in, every single weekend. We all know what Lewis is capable of doing on all of these tracks. It's just now him being able to connect with the Ferrari car, which he's been able to do. He was fortunately one of the drivers who was able to serve his penalty under, while he went into the pit under the yellow flag, which allowed him to not have to lose his position at all. He qualified really well. And, I mean, there's not really much to say. I mean, he just had a very solid race overall, and it looked great. And, props to him for what he's done. And, he's going to be riding a high going into Barcelona. I also wanted to point out that although Max Verstappen did not have a great, run of luck this weekend, in fact, it was pretty dismal luck to not be able to race at all, it was the teammate that he had next to him in Isaac Hadjar, who had himself a pretty solid drive. I mean, solid it might be an understatement here. Him being able to stand atop the podium, the fact that he was, nursing an issue with his car throughout the entire race for 60 plus laps, the fact that, he was, able to qualify well when he needed him to, and also to step up for the team in terms of points in the constructors when Max unfortunately DNF'd. It was a very good weekend for him, a very positive weekend for him. And this is something that Red Bull needs, right? In a weekend where Max maybe doesn't finish, right? Isaac needs to be that guy that comes out and does, just this. Gets the team a good haul of points. A podium for his efforts is excellent. It's his second podium of his career. He's going to be riding a high going into the rest of this European leg as well. So great for him. And then the sister team next to them had a phenomenal result in 5th and 6th place for Liam Lawson, as well as Arvid Lindblad, who, were able to utilize the red flag. Liam qualified really well, was able to keep, on the restarts, was able to maintain staying within that top 10, and then through drivers dropping out of the race, was able to solidify himself that P5 finish in the Grand Prix. And then next to him, the rookie teammate in Arvid Lindblad, who was able to find himself up into the points. He had to pit at some point. He went long and was rewarded with it at the red flag, where he was able to change his tires and was able to basically give himself that point. Not point, but multiple points, as he claimed P6 for it. It's a great result for, Racing Bulls. I almost said V-Carb. For Racing Bulls this weekend, especially in the fight for P5 in the Constructors' Championship, getting 2 drivers in to score a pretty good haul here. It's going to be really interesting. The Red Bull cars, I keep bringing up the ADUO, but they're not going to get the same upgrade that the Alpine car that they're going to be playing against, or the Haas car that they're going to be racing against, will be having. So getting these points in while they can is going to be so key for this team. And, them eyeing P5 will be incredible if they're able to do so. And this was a great weekend for them. Now on to some of the losers that I wanted to point out from the front-running group. We had George Russell, who, I mean, his unfortunate form continues for himself. A late penalty for him speeding, the fact that he wasn't able to officially, he came into the pits, didn't do his mandatory 5-second that he needed to do. Ultimately got penalized again as a drive-through penalty at the end of the race on the second restart, and tumbled all the way down to P12. And so he basically lost another 25 points to Kimi in what was just, again, just unlucky for him. It was a situation where, they pitted Kimi and George came in and he had to wait for Kimi, and then George goes in thinking that him waiting there for the 5 seconds, which there was some gray area, and I guess on the broadcast they were saying that I think Schumacher in Benetton did something in 99, I think, to like there was something going on where he was kind of able to serve his penalty before he went in the box with it was some weird stuff. But anyways, basically he didn't serve his penalty when he was there, and so he got pinged for it. Now he's down a considerable haul of points. Let me see. It is 68 points. Yeah, 68 points. So Russell's down 68 points now, which is, it's going to be pretty tough to haul those points back, especially if Kimi can continue to have such strong weekends, and also the fact that the Mercedes may just be the class of the field at the moment, with really there's no sign to stopping that, which means he has to beat his teammate every single weekend. Every race that Kimi is able to get more points over George makes the comeback, even though it's still early on, and Kimi could have a failure of some sort and he could have reliability issues. It definitely is not. That's almost 3 races separating the two. So, and he's also third in the drivers with Lewis now passing him in that. I also wanted to say that it was not Leclerc's weekend. He unfortunately did not finish the race with about 10 laps to spare. He crashed into the exact same spot that Lance Stroll did to initially bring out the initial red flag on track, which is, I mean, for him to go after the race and say, the brakes have been a huge issue for me, and also to have the brake supplier of Ferrari come out and say that it's a little premature to say that it was necessarily just a brake-related issue for him. Definitely was not a good weekend for Leclerc in terms of what he had expected to do. I think what all of us expected him to do as well. I actually wanted to read out the comments made by the supplier, because it's kind of crazy, because they put him on blast here. But they said Brembo is the brake supplier for Ferrari. The partnership between Brembo and Scuderia Ferrari has continued for more than 50 years and also extends to other brands within the group. At present, the company does not know the causes of the issues experienced by Charles Leclerc, and therefore considers it premature to draw definitive conclusions before the available data has been analyzed. So, In the post-race, Leclerc said that he will be going towards the brakes that Hamilton has, which is not supplied by Brembo. I think he has a different one, if I recall. He goes with like a different supplier. Leclerc decided to stick with the Italian brakes, and Hamilton decided to go for a different one. But we'll have to see if Leclerc can bounce back from that. Because, for him, Monaco has always been a high or it's been a low. It hasn't really been either or. So you never really know. And this weekend was definitely a low for him. And I wanted to point this out here. So Cadillac did not get their first point of the season before Aston Martin. They almost did. Instead, Aston Martin got the first point over Cadillac. And that's it. That's the story. I'm just kidding. But, after some weird decisions by Checo this weekend to mess up the start where he was supposed to go, got penalized for it, was able to move back up to P10, and on the starting, on the restart on this, where they did the block start again, he went on the same wrong, he went on the one that he wasn't supposed to and got penalized again for the second time. For Cadillac here, I'm not saying that they won't score any points this year, and I don't know what the end of the season is going to look like. As someone who really wants Cadillac to be competitive and to be really good, I understand there takes time. The issue is that Cadillac desperately needs points for the constructors, right? They would have been one step closer to Audi, who only has 2 points this year. And the fact that they would be ahead of Aston Martin, the overall prize money at the end of the season is significantly higher. I think it's $20 million in a difference between last place and second to last place. So the amount of money is so important to get for any constructor. Unfortunately for Cadillac, they might be kicking themselves at the end of the season, wishing that they could have had one more point back, potentially, right? And all of it was really due to some silly mistakes that kind of costed them at the end of it all. But Fernando Alonso got a point. He got a point. Aston Martin was able to get their first point of the season after all that. So, pretty crazy. He's always able to do something, especially going long in that race. Was able to get up for that final point. So that brings us to our final classifications for the top 10. Kimi Antonelli ends up winning the race. Lewis Hamilton in second place. Isaac Hadjar in third. Oscar Piastri in fourth. Liam Lawson in fifth. Arvid Lindblad in sixth. Pierre Gasly, after really unfortunate luck, to not be on the podium, in P7. Alexander Albon in P8. Esteban Ocon, P9. And of course, Fernando Alonso in P10. Your driver standings in the top 10. Kimi Antonelli now has 156 points. Moving into second place is Lewis Hamilton at 90 points. Dropping down into third place with no points this weekend was George Russell at 88. Charles Leclerc stands at 75 points. Oscar Piastri at 60 points. Lando, 58. Max Verstappen at 43 points. Isaac Hadjar at 29. Liam Lawson at 26. And tied up with him is Pierre Gasly in 10th as well. So I guess Lawson and Gasly at 26 points apiece to round that out. So yeah, that's Monaco for you. And just when you thought that we were done talking about all of that, there's more. And that is IndyCar. So I'm going to kind of go through this one a little bit fast. But Gateway happened. It's been a race. It's an irregular oval, let's just say. It actually provides pretty good racing overall. I actually really like the track. It was, let's just say, when Alex Palou got pole position in qualifying, I was like, okay, this is all going to happen again. He's going to get pole position. He's going to somehow be able to work his magic on a track, by the way, that he's never done better than fourth place in. The luck kind of ran out for him, and I'll touch upon that in a second here. But I did just want to highlight and say the fact that he qualified the way that he did was mighty impressive. I mean, he qualified over a mile per hour faster on average than the second place person of David Malukas. So say what you want. Alex Palou has become kind of like the master of qualifying, and is just able to do it. He's just able to will it out. And then through really good, and I'm not glazing here, but to just be able to have the strategy to get things right every single time, mighty impressive. Unfortunately, the strategy side did not help him out, as he did end up succumbing to P17 in the race. He decided to go on an alternate strategy during the race, topping off with the rain in the air in St. Louis. You know, he was kind of playing the gamble, and it ultimately did not end up paying off for him or his teammate Scott Dixon in the race. Alex Palou, you know, basically running out of gas. He's having to coast in the pit lane. His car was having a misfire. Obviously, with no fuel in the car, it was hard to get the car back up and going again, as he just kind of tumbled down the order for himself. So the luck in the Chip Ganassi car in the number 10 just wasn't with him in the race and the team as a whole. But that definitely makes, I guess, the rest of the season potentially a lot more interesting, because, I mean, that kind of gave way for some of the people who did get points, like David Malukas and Kyle Kirkwood, an opportunity to kind of close in on that massive gap. In fact, Kyle Kirkwood, who finished P6 in the race, is now 49 points under Alex Palou here. I mean, there's still, again, we're halfway through the season. There's still half the races left. I would say that there's still ample opportunity, as long as we can see some better qualifying overall from Kyle. And who knows, even David Malukas is still kind of in the running for that as well. So those are kind of like your top three for all of that. Some news regarding some changes before the actual race weekend. It was announced that Ryan Hunter-Reay would be moving into the sporting director role with Arrow McLaren. To me, this isn't really super surprising. We know that he's been kind of embedded with Papaya since the beginning of the season. Internally, there was some kind of rumor that he might be moving into a position of, you know, within that team as well. The fact that, you know, he drove for McLaren in the Indy 500 race this past year, a couple weeks ago, actually, kind of solidified that, like, he's kind of in a position in McLaren where he's kind of become like a focal point for that team. The McLaren official website posted saying that in this role as the sporting director under team principal Tony Kanon's leadership, Ryan is tasked and will be tasked with its maximizing on-track performance while contributing to the team's commercial success. He will serve as the critical bridge between competition, engineering, and the driver's lineup, and of course the commercial efforts. in addition to contributions to optimizing car performance, race strategy, and driver development. He's basically going to be acting as an ambassador for the team, as well as working within the team and the structure, the drivers, the strategy, like just kind of all in all for it. It's definitely good to see some people that are within the sport continue to kind of find roles within IndyCar. I think it's healthy for the scene. It's something that I think is a good direction for IndyCar to get to, is, having some of these drivers that, have retired from the sport full time, moving into positions within teams, specifically some of the, I would say, like, top teams or teams that, continue to grow, build, and develop. And McLaren is one of those teams. Ryan Hunter-Reay is, he's a series champion in 2012, and he did win the 2014 Indianapolis 500. And so he is definitely someone who knows what he's doing, and he's definitely a commanding figure, and I think this is a good move for McLaren. I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that ends up impacting the team moving forward, but I like the move, McLaren. I like the move. The driver that ended up standing on top of the podium this weekend was the king of St. Louis, Josef Newgarden. Yes. Shocker, right? Well, shocker in that, the fact that he started in P8 and was still able to figure out and find victory around the oval, but kind of not surprising with his track record around this circuit. Within the last 11 appearances around here, Josef has claimed now 6 victories on this short oval. He's looked lights out here. In fact, he's literally the king of Gateway, let's be real, with his recent success through all of this. This victory for Josef also means that this is his 15th short oval victory of his 34 career wins in IndyCar, which is mighty impressive for him as well. 34 career wins for Josef. It's not too shabby, man. It's not too shabby. Yeah, so as I said, Josef qualified P8, and he was kind of able to stay within arm's reach of Marcus Ericsson, who was having a fantastic race for himself in that Andretti car. He was able to kind of maintain that gap, and then when the shortcomings in the pit lane happened during the safety car situation, it was ultimately Josef Newgarden who came out on top out of the pit lane, and that was kind of it for him, right? He kind of took lead and command of that. It was an honorable effort by Marcus Ericsson, who, let's just say, has been in the hot seat. There's been some criticism. There's also been uncertainty on whether, he would be staying in IndyCar. He is one of the only drivers on the grid who has, accolades like a 500 that is not signed for next year. For him, this was definitely a result that he had wanted. Although he did finish P2 in the race, he did lead for 114 laps of the 260 laps, within that, and he was even able to move into first place after just 48 laps. So he was feeling that car. It was humming underneath him. Little bummed that he, wasn't able to come out victorious in that race, but he looked lights out, and that car looked so good underneath him. Whatever Andretti did set him up for so much success, and he's looked so good now on ovals. Like, when he gets the car underneath him, for a driver that came from Formula One, they kind of talked about this on the broadcast, he has gotten so good at ovals and adding that to his resume that it's mighty impressive, the fact that he's been able to do that. So this has been his best race result in, well, I think it was 2 years. Yeah, his best race result in 2 years. So kudos to Marcus for all of that. The other driver in P3 rounding out the podium this weekend was Rasmussen, who, let's just say, is probably the most exciting driver to watch around the short ovals. It's incredible to see what he's been able to do. This year was a little bit different. He was able to end the race. He wasn't able to do so last year. And for someone who's had an abysmal start to the year, he was taken out in Phoenix earlier on in the season. He got an extension before this race by Ed Carpenter, so they obviously see the potential in him as a driver. Overall, this was a great result for him. I know that he was probably looking to win the race. Josef just, was able to ultimately bring it home. But, to get that podium, after signing a contract is always a great thing for the team, and also just for you as a confidence booster going into the rest of the season. And I mean, out of all the races, remaining, Christian has won 2 of those races last year. So there's definitely opportunity for Rasmussen to potentially get another win this year, or maybe even 2 or more. Who knows? But this was definitely a really good race for him. He started in P19, ended on the podium in 3rd place. I also wanted to shout out 2 other drivers. One of them, unfortunately, was unable to finish the race as he had an engine issue, but that was Kyle Collette, who I talked about to great lengths during the Indy 500 episode a couple weeks back. But just, the fact that he's racing with broken ribs, he's a rookie, the fact that he was able to make his way through good strategy after starting, I think it was P20 he started, the fact that he was able to work his way into potentially having a chance, if not at a podium, at least a top 5 finish in this race. I mean, he's just one of those drivers who's gutsy. He's getting better, and the AJ Foyt team has been able to put him in an opportunity to be able to have a chance to fight in some of these races the last couple weeks. For him, it was just really unfortunate that his car kind of gave out on him, near the end of the race. But I mean, for a guy who was able to do, I think it was like he was leading for 7 laps in the race overall. I mean, that's just a confidence booster for a rookie to be able to be in the front and fight that way through. And I'm just really excited to continue to see him grow. Just as I am with all the other rookies in the field or second-year drivers, it's always good to see some of these younger drivers in the scene, or those that haven't been racing in IndyCar for that long, get these opportunities, which just kind of makes it so much more fun. And that's why I really like IndyCar in general, right? Formula One, you have your front runners. It's kind of hard to work your way from the back all the way to the front unless you have the best car. But in some of these races with strategies, with refueling, all of that, like there's just so much opportunity that like you can have some of these other players coming in, and it's just really fun. It's really good. And then also I wanted to give the 4th place driver, Rinus VeeKay, his flowers, because not only did he finish P6 at Indianapolis earlier on this year in the 500, but he finished P4, which is a humongous result for Juncos Hollinger Racing as a whole. The fact that there is some, I don't like saying gossip, but there's definitely some rumor that there's a potential that we will be seeing VeeKay in a car that is potentially a front runner in the near future is definitely really exciting, because he is very, very strong on these ovals, and he's just a very complete driver, I think, in Indy. And to be on a team like Juncos Hollinger and be able to produce results like this is a testament to the ability that he's able to have for himself. And yeah, I mean, 4th place, it's pretty good. It's really good. All right, so the final classification at Gateway this weekend, we had Josef Newgarden, who came out victorious. Like I said, Marcus Ericsson in P2, Christian Rasmussen in P3, Rinus VK P4, Scotty Mack after a very late end run on some nicer tires, some better tires for himself, was able to move from P9 back up into the top 5 at the very end. Kyle Kirkwood found himself a good haul of points comparatively to Alex Palou, who didn't, who wasn't able to claim as many points comparatively to him. David Malukas, P7, Will Power, P8. Marcus Armstrong continues his form of top 10 finishes in P9. And it was Christian Lundgaard who rounded out in the top 10 for this race. Alrighty, y'all. Well, this was a long episode. I wanted to really touch upon that ADUO. If you stuck with me throughout all of this, I really do appreciate you. I hope that this was informational. I hope you learned something at the end of all of it. If you like what you heard today, make sure to give this episode a like and also follow on your listening platform of choice. Also, comment down below who you think is going to come out on top in Barcelona this next weekend. We won't be having any IndyCar, and I did check the schedule, so no conflict. It's just going to be Formula One that I'll be covering this weekend, which is kind of nice. Allows me to catch up a little bit on some of the other projects and stuff that I'm working on. But that does mean that we will have an episode next week. It might be a little bit shorter in content-wise, but there's so much racing going on in June, and although I'm, unable to cover everything that's going on, though, I highly recommend that you guys stay up to date on all the motorsport stuff, because there's so much going on in WEC, IndyCar, Formula One. Like, it's insane. NASCAR. So it's just a really good month in motorsport as a fan. So, but regardless, though, thank you guys so much for listening. This was the Open Wheel FM podcast. My name is Nicholas Clay. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See you next time, next week.